Arizona decides that now is the time for them to go out and do their massive election audit that they should have been doing between Election Day and Inauguration Day. But hey, we won't talk about that or anything. In other news, a new peaceful riot has happened at a state house, but it's totally not an insurrection this time, so we'll talk a bit about why. Joe Biden has called for action to close out the U.S. summit, including a possibility calling of cutting down on red meat. So we'll talk a bit about that, whether that's true, whether that's not true, or anything else that happened with that. And Chipotle comes out and tells you what the rest of us have been telling Chipotle for years. I don't know how to go back and explain this any better. But hey, now that Chipotle's saying it, hey, maybe something might happen now. This I don't know. I have no faith in corporate America anymore. But anyway, it's going to be all this and more. Hey, 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 do you trust the plan yet? I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and we have got, as usual, on a Monday, a bunch of stuff to get to today. Oh my! Well, let's just say they tried to cram as much as they could back into the weekend as they could. So it's going to be a whole bunch of stuff and more. I hope you guys are prepared for this because it's going to be a wild ride. But before we get started, well, before I sell my regular wares off the beginning of this, I do want to point one thing out that happened just before we went live here. So last night, I was kind of looking through Twitter here, and I noted the fact that President Biden has come up and said, "Come on, man, it's time for Congress to eliminate gun manufacturers' immunity from liability." And I tweeted back. And I don't like to talk about my own Twitter feed just because it's so much more fun making fun of everyone else's Twitter feed. And there's a lot of other Twitter feed to make fun of. Trust me on that. Hey, we want to become famous? BigFollows.com. We could become famous. Anyway, I don't like to talk about my own Twitter feed that much. I would much rather talk about and make fun of so many other people's Twitter feeds. It's so much more fun to do that, but I had to come back and tweet back. Gun manufacturers don't have immunity from liability, and this is a big argument that keeps coming back. The president and his activist groups want to come out and say that gun manufacturers have an immunity from liability because you can't go back and sue a gun manufacturer if, like, you can't go back and sue Colt if some kid who has passed several FBI background checks in order to get his guns, who's been on the FBI's radar, goes off and shoots up a high school and gives David Hogg a fucking platform. That should be a reason to sue the gun manufacturer right there, is the fact that they gave David Hogg a platform. But either way, you can't do anything for that because their guns are operating in the way that they're supposed to. But, and I pointed this out, if I fire my Smith & Wesson and the action flies off and cracks my fucking skull, the good folks at Smith & Wesson will be paying off all of my debt and buying me a nice piece of land to fire my new collection of SIGs upon. And a new friend of the show, Stacy for Truth, who has joined a group chat that I'm also in at this point, pointed out that this is true and she will take the case. So there you go. As long as the firearm is operating in the manner in which it's intended to operate, then no, there's no liability for this. And I don't know where the fuck they think that they're liability free at this point. I don't know where this came from. But it is absolutely not true. But we've got to get into the regular selling of the wares and get into the news, not just my Twitter feed here. So before we get started, head on over and check out all my friends who transmit on the Freedom Scoop Media Group. We are still under construction. We tried to get this done by the big charity stream last weekend, but, you know, things came back up and we couldn't come back and do this, but we are working diligently to get this through, ready to go. And one of these people is going to be me, trying to make sure that I'm able to get up and get ready to go and get my bio in, that was one of the big sticking points off this. But to get all the bios in, but make sure you still check out my friends, the Freckles and Brit Show, the Generational Gap, the R-Rated Conservative, the Daily Ignoramus, and the Breakdown with Birkenhoff. Go over there and check out all those channels. They're great channels. We have content almost every day, and even sometimes with the Breakdown with Birkenhoff with his college schedule, sometimes we'll even get a Sunday stream. So some weeks we will have content every single day from my friends over on the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Go and check them out. And once we get back up and running, we will have ways for you to directly support creators through our website. So head on over there, pick up some of our swag, help us support great creators, and pardon our dust as we put the finishing touches on the website here. All right, let's check finance. Starting with the Dow, which is sitting at 34,043.49. That is up 227.59 points. That's from the beginning of Friday to the end of Friday. That's up 2/3% rather. So they managed to stay up. It's been mostly flat. Like if you go back and look at the 5-day, the month, the 6-month, it's been for the most part mostly flat. I mean, that's the furthest back it goes, back into November, where it hit the bottom where nobody knew what the hell was going on with the election, and just kind of a very steady growth. A jump up, and then just kind of staying steady here. Which, if, you know, people come out and say, well, the Biden economy's doing so well. If it was doing so well, it would be spiking up, not slowly flatlining all the way back up. So that's what we're going to see coming back off of this. Let's look at the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is rebounding again, back from its 48,000 end of the week, last week low, up to 53,716 US dollars and 20 US cents. So those of you who bought the dip, congratulations. You're starting to pull in a little bit of cash back off of this. Awesome for you. The gas in Madison. Let's have a look at that. All right. Looks like a couple of the stations around the Madison area are 257, but we also have that jump up to 259. It doesn't appear that there's any more 258, so we're going to start to see that steady climb. Just the beginning of last week, we were seeing 253s all over the place, and now we're seeing 257s and 259s everywhere. So the slow creep is coming back up, just like the slow creep coming up off the market. So we will continue to watch this. From the investors, starting with IBD. Dow Jones Futures, Bitcoin rebounds, Apple, Tesla lead huge earnings in pivotal stock market week. From Ed Carson. Dow Jones Futures edged higher Monday morning, while S&P 500 Futures and NASDAQ Futures declined slightly. Bitcoin rebounded powerfully after undercutting recent lows on Sunday. The stock market rally went on a true roller coaster ride last week, with some volatile daily action only about to end where it started. The Dow Jones, S&P 500, and NASDAQ Composite closed with fractional losses, while the small cap Russell 2000 edged higher. The market rally will likely take its cue this coming week from a deluge of earnings reports. Tesla kicks off earnings on Monday, with Google parent Alphabet, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon also due this week. These earnings reports alone will have a big impact on the stock market rally. All 6 stocks are on the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, with Apple and Microsoft on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Apple stock has a $2.25 trillion market cap, with Microsoft stock, Apple, and Google each worth more than $1.5 trillion. All told, these 6 stocks have a market cap of just over $9 trillion. Plus, their results will have major implications for rivals, customers, and suppliers. Tesla has a cup with handle buy point. Amazon stock, has also formed a handle in a long consolidation. Facebook stock is just above an initial buy point, though it has some alternate entries as well. Apple stock and Google have tight patterns, though it's not clear if either is actionable. Microsoft is consolidating at record highs. Microsoft stock is on the IBD leaderboard and IBD long-term leaders. Google stock is on the Big Cap 20. For the Bitcoin price traded above 53,000, up versus a day earlier, Sunday morning. The digital asset fell below 48,000, hitting its lowest level since early March. From its April 14th peak of 64,829 hours before Coinbase came public, Bitcoin has retreated steady, undercutting $50,000 for the first time in weeks on Friday. I'm still going to hold to my prediction, even though it's going to get a little bit hairier as we move on into the year and as we get closer to the end of the year. It's going to seem a little bit hairier off of this, but I'm going to hold to my prediction that we see just a touch over 100,000 by the end of the year. Elaine is holding to her prediction, and we talked a bit about this off mic, that we're going to see 400,000 for Bitcoin, but I don't think it's going to get that high. I do anticipate a little bit over 100,000, but not 400,000. But we will continue to watch as the year goes on and as the money printer continues to go burr. On the futures, Dow futures rose 0.1% versus fair value. S&P 500 futures lost 0.1%. NASDAQ 100 futures retreated 0.4%. Yeah, those gas prices going up are really going to start to push these futures up on the industrials, but the techs, they're going to start to drop back. So we'll see what's coming with that. Given the deluge of earnings coming this week, it wouldn't be surprising to see the stock markets time into some of those reports coming in. And remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. All right, let's see what Yahoo News has to say, and then we're going to get into the big news of the day. All right, Yahoo Finance. What stock market history tells us about corporate tax hikes? From the Morning Brief from Sam Rowe. I'm interested to see what they have to say, because I know that one of the big things that drove the Bitcoin down was the increase, or at least the threat of increase in the capital gains. So let's see what we've got going here. Stocks usually go up. The prospect for higher taxes continues to be a concern for investors, and it'll continue to be a source of uncertainty until some sort of tax reform is passed. Okay. Anyway. While a higher corporate tax rate would likely be a hindrance for most companies, it's far from certain that the implementation of a higher rate would be enough for stocks to sell off, as discussed in the Morning Brief last week. But what does history suggest will happen to the stocks should higher taxes come to pass? BMO Capital Markets equity strategist Brian Belsky looked into it, and the answer isn't all bad. Tax increases have been far from detrimental to U.S. stock market performance, Belsky wrote in a recent note to clients. President Biden's proposal to raise the U.S. corporate tax rate to 28% from 21% would mark the first increase since 1993 and the sixth tax hike since 1945, he continued. During the 5 prior corporate tax rate increases, in 1950, 1951, 1952, 1968, and 1993, the S&P 500 index posted an average calendar year gain of 12.9% with positive price returns in each instance. This gain was well above the 4.6% average return registered during the 9 annual periods when tax rate was reduced, and also higher than 9% return for all calendar years going back to 1945, which is interesting. One of the things that I look at with this, and one of the things where I could understand with this as well, is the investment coming off this. Now, once you hike the corporate tax rates, first and foremost, this is all going to get passed on to the customers, and we'll talk a bit about that later on in the program. But your corporations, your big corporations, don't pay taxes. For God's sakes, the squad's actually right on that. Your big corporations don't pay taxes. You pay the big corporations taxes because they bury that into the prices of the products that you buy. And furthermore, one of the big things with that is this does help to get some of the small business competitors out of the way. So the people who are actually on your S&P, your Dow, your NASDAQ, your companies that are actually going to sit and be on these big indices that they have, those are the ones who are going to make big money coming back off of this. Because all of their competitors are going to go away once they increase. So I can understand why that would be, why the indexes would go up. I would be interested to see what other IPOs go and how many small businesses do come up and what actual spending patterns happen with this as well. I do like to see where the data goes with that because I would have anticipated it going the other way. But I would be interested to see what we have with small business startup, small business retention, and employment rates during these same years. Now, yes, this fluff piece here can come out and tell you that, oh, well, raising the corporate tax rate, the Republicans don't know what they're talking about. They're not going to do anything about this. But, there are other sides to this coin as well. So, something definitely to watch. And we'll see what happens with that. Belsky also observed that those periods come with above average real GDP growth of 5.7%. But that's just the period around the tax hikes. What then about the overall level of taxation? Are returns lower during high tax regimes? Despite common perceptions to the country, our work shows that there's little evidence to suggest that corporate tax rates have any type of meaningful impact on U.S. equity market returns, Belsky observed. For instance, going back to 1945, the S&P 500 has averaged 10% gain during years in which the U.S. corporate tax rate was below 35%, compared to 10.3% gain posted during years when the tax rate was 50% or higher. Keep in mind that the proposed 28% corporate tax rate would still rank among the lowest U.S. history after those seen in 2018 to 2020. Importantly, Belsky notes, a similar story exists on the earnings front over the past decades. U.S. companies have been able to generate substantial earnings growth in different tax environments, including periods of high corporate tax rates. This is critical because earnings growth is the most important driver of stock prices. So, they seem to think that this is all going to be a good thing and, tax the rich and eat the rich and everything, but, there are other factors to go with this, and I would be interested to see where this goes. Because I have looked at the fact that we started to increase corporate taxes and taxes in general under the Obama years, and we saw the market fall out to the point where we had 1% economy growth, and sometimes lower under the Obama years. So we'll sit back and watch this and see where it goes. All right, let's get into the big news of the morning. Starting with a tweet here from K. Diddy Kaveke. 9 camera live feed. I don't know what I'm reading here. 9 camera live feed of the Arizona ballot audit. So much to go through and so worth it. Election integrity. This comes out on a quote tweet of the live stream CCTV of the Arizona ballot audit, which will go to this website here. So I'm Not going to open up this website, but we'll talk a bit about what's going on in that currently. But there is a place here. You can go back and grab this tweet here from KD Ditch. That's at KDDITCH if you want to. You can grab her tweet from that and jump in and watch the CCTV viewing of that. But let's get into what's actually happening with this. All right, starting with 12 News NBC. Maricopa County election audit continues after Democrats balk at $1 million requirement to pause. This is from 12 News' Bram Resnick. A major political dispute over the results of last year's presidential election in Maricopa County is developing, but for now, the audit sponsored by Arizona State Senate Republicans will continue. A Maricopa County judge ordered a pause after state Democrats filed a lawsuit to block the audit. The pause would not have been from 5 p.m. Friday until noon Monday, but the Arizona Democratic Party will not post the $1 million bond as requested by the judge. In a statement, party officials said, in part, the fact of the matter is that no one knows the actual cost of the sham audit, and President Fan and the Cyber Ninjas have not once made the figure public. So wait, the Democrats care about spending and how much something costs? Well, obviously it's because it's not one of their pet projects, so of course they care about this. Then they want to stop it too. That's going to be one of the things that comes along with this. Maricopa County delivered the first shipment of ballot counting machines Wednesday for Arizona Senate Republicans' audit, but only after the Senate agreed to shield the county from any legal or financial liability connected to the audit, according to documents obtained by 12 News. One particular focus of concern of the country, the work of audit leader Cyber Ninjas, whose owner has promoted false claims about the 2020 election. Some of those claims have targeted the owner of the county's ballot counting machines. That's funny. I would wait until after the audit before I said whether or not something was a false claim or not. Wouldn't you? Because the audit's going to be the one that tells that, and you would have to scramble to write a retraction. If this statement happened to be wrong for whatever reason, but of course, we can't say anything about that because nothing bad happened in the 2020 election, wink, wink, honk, honk. Joe Biden is the most popular president in the history of mankind, wink, honk. The multi-million-dollar machines were loaded into 3 trucks at the county's election headquarters Wednesday morning. They were driven in convoy for 3 miles to Veterans Memorial Coliseum at the state fairgrounds with undercover sheriff's deputies providing security along the route. The handover of the machines on Wednesday and 2.1 million county ballots on Thursday are part of Senate Republicans' unprecedented audit of Maricopa County's 2020 presidential vote won by Democrat Joe Biden, the most popular president in history, far surpassing the popularity of Barack Obama. Later in the afternoon, the Arizona Democratic Party and the sole Democrat on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors are suing in an effort to block the Arizona Senate's ballot recount and audit of the county's 2020 election. The lawsuit alleges Republican Senate President Karen Fann pledged to a judge that the Senate would protect ballot and voter privacy before he ruled the Senate could access 2.1 million voted ballots and the tabulation machines. Instead, they say that she is outsourcing the recount to a biased third party and putting election integrity at risk. The recount starts Friday. Fann says the ballots are secure and protected. So that's one of the things that we
George
see going
Floyd
on
Square
with
is
this.
a police-free zone created after an impromptu
All right, what's
memorial
playing
was
audio?
built near the site where Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer last year, and it's been a continuous site of
Give me a
protests
second.
since the day he died. For months, an ASU professor, who is also the director
Okay, where am I getting audio from? I don't know. I guess we'll figure that out. Or we'll close this tab, one of the two. Alright, anyway, let's keep going off of this. I got a couple more. From CNN, Arizona Republicans begin reviewing the 2020 ballots in effort to undermine the results, from Sarah Murray. And it's interesting to see where CNN's going to take this as well. from Sarah Murray and Stephanie Becker over at CNN. An election audit of the 2020 ballots from Arizona's largest county, one demanded by Republican state senators, overseen by a purveyor of election conspiracies, and live streamed by a pro Trump television network, kicked off on Friday. Earlier in the week, Maricopa County handed nearly 2.1 million ballots and nearly 400 tabulation machines over to the state Senate after Republican lawmakers subpoenaed the materials, and a judge ruled county officials had to comply in a last-ditch effort to block the controversial audit. The Arizona Democratic Party and the lone Democrat serving on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, which oversees elections, sued to halt the count Thursday evening. A judge agreed to briefly pause the audit after a Friday hearing, but Democrats declined to provide the required $1 million bond. So the audit continued. The partisan audit, which could stretch for roughly 2 months, comes after county election officials conducted 2 audits and found no evidence of widespread voter fraud and other issues. The Arizona Secretary of State has already certified the election results, showing President Biden narrowly won the state, but the latest review highlights how many Republicans continue to cling to former President Trump's unfounded claims of widespread voter fraud in 2020, falsehoods that continue to roil the GOP. On Friday, Trump continued to spread his election conspiracy claims in a statement and thanked Arizona's brave and patriotic Republican state senators. Arizona Senate President Karen Fann, a Republican who has led the charge for the audit, has insisted she's running a fair process to ensure election integrity, but the overly partisan review has already sparked an outcry from nonpartisan election security experts, GOP officials in Maricopa County, and Arizona Secretary of State, among others. I've been avoiding calling it an audit, to be quite honest with you, because that's not what it is. They've been making this up and they go along, Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, a Democrat, said in an interview with CNN. This is just a fishing expedition by people who are determined to find something wrong. Well, if there's something wrong, wouldn't you want to catch it at some point? I mean, hypothetically, if there was something wrong, this could affect your guy as well, somewhere down the road in the future. Wouldn't you want to catch this at some point? Wouldn't you want to take a little bit of time and say, okay, we'll go look through this now so that we never have to do this in the future? I mean, that's what I would do. You know, that's why I changed the oil in my truck. I shouldn't have to go back out and spend money on it. It's running fine. But I want to go and get some stuff nipped in the bud before something goes catastrophically wrong. And that's the same thing. There's questions about this. There are questions from within your county about this. Hey, let's have a look at this. Let's see if we can figure out if something needs to be addressed before the next time we have to do this. I don't understand where the logic is coming from, except for the fact that evil Orange Man bad, anybody who supports evil Orange Man is bad, and this was the safest and most secure election in history, and Joe Biden is the most popular president ever, wink wink honk honk. And I do love the fact that this NBC affiliate that we read from earlier and then CNN are both coming out and saying, well, this is just to come out and look at the unfounded claims of voter suppression. Do you know? Have you've been blocked on every audit that you've been able to do? Every judge has blocked the audit for all this. So let's sit down and do the audit. Let's see. If you've got nothing to hide, show your fucking hand, and let's see what's wrong, and if there is something wrong. But the fact that you're jumping in and trying to discredit this as soon as you possibly can tells me that you're fucking hiding something. And what are you hiding? What do you not want people to come back and find out? And furthermore, like I said, and like Chilaga came back and pointed out that was a good catch as well. How can you say that that there's nothing to see here before we've gone to look to see if there's something to see here? They went through the legal process. They got the warrants. The judges signed off on it. They did everything legally. They're not just coming back and going for a fishing. But it's the way that they frame this is just amazing. Now, I'm a little concerned with what happens if they find something at this point. Now, a lot of people come out, especially the people who wear the red hats, will come out and say that, okay, they're going to find something's wrong and then Donald will become the president once again. That's actually not going to happen. So if we come, for whatever reason, and find out, they find something wrong here, and then this sparks Michigan to go do the same thing. And then a couple other states come back and do the same thing. This sparks a widespread look at Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin destroyed their ballots already. But they go back and look at these under a microscope because they found something wrong in Arizona. And all of a sudden, now we have enough electoral votes that are challenged that now it's time for Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Kamala Harris to get taken out of office, which they would. If this got sued back out, then they would have to be removed from office for cheating. But now we don't go back into the point where Donald Trump is the president. This goes down the chain of command to the next, because both of them would have to be removed. That's the thing to keep in mind, because they were both running together on the same, what would be fraudulent ticket if they did happen to find something. Even though nothing bad happened, this was the most secure election possible in history. Wink, wink, honk, honk. If they were to come back out and find something in this, then both Biden and Harris would have to be removed. And the next person down the chain of command, who the presidency would go to, is one Nancy Pelosi. So we would have a President Nancy Pelosi, who would likely nominate Kamala Harris to be her vice president, or Hillary Clinton, for God's sake, and then resign.
Our big story tonight is one that has a lot of attention across the country right now. The audit of the 2020 election results.
Shut up. So that's something to look at. That's something that's actually a little bit concerning to me as we go into this, but we will see where it goes and what happens with this. And I expect this to be front and center news unless they find somebody else to get shot by a police officer in the next 2 weeks. This is probably going to be front and center. All right, a little bit more over this thing because the Arizona Attorney General, let's focus a little bit more on what she had to say with this. This comes to Fox 10 from the Associated Press. Arizona's AG has brushed away the state's top election officials' call for an investigation into possible irregularities in the legislative chamber's newly begun audit of the 2020 election results from the state's most populous county. Democratic Secretary of State Katie Hobbs on April 23rd cited media reports of security lapses at the audit site and the auditor's plans to question Maricopa County voters at their homes. But Republican AG Mark... How is that name 8 letters long and only 2 of them are vowels? Let's take a stab at this one. Brenovich is what we're going to go with. Later Friday said Hobbs provided no facts to warrant an investigation. Valid complaints will be investigated. Brenovich wrote Hobbs in a letter. Any such complaints, however, must be based on credible facts and not conjecture of politics, he said. Brenovich also said the separation of powers between branches of government demands deference to the audit commissioned by the Republican-led Arizona Senate. Hobbs had cited concerns that the audit might violate the state's law for security of ballot and election equipment and against intimidation of voters. That's also a concern. I'm not going to come out and tell you that it's not a concern. Those laws must be enforced to protect the integrity of our democracy and voters' confidence in our processes, she wrote. The Senate-authorized audit includes a hand recount of 2.1 million ballots from Maricopa County, which President Biden won, along with fellow Democrat Mark Kelly, now the state's junior senator, which would also be interesting to come back and see. Conspiracy theories about the election have proliferated nationwide since Biden's victory. That's actually, I think, would be more concerning to the Democrat Party than overturning President Biden's election, because they still get President Pelosi and she can still install Kamala Harris off of this. Mark Kelly, the state's junior senator, if that gets overturned and it goes to, I believe Ducey, by Arizona's laws, I believe Ducey would be the one that would turn around then and appoint a new senator back in Mark Kelly's place. If that election got overturned, That means that Cocaine Mitch is the majority leader again. Just so you know. Conspiracy theories about the election have proliferated nationwide since Biden's victory, which was totally and completely above board and nothing bad happened, wink wink honk honk, over former President Trump. But they have had particular staying power in Arizona, which flipped Democratic in the presidential race for the second time in 72 years. Repeated reviews of the election results have found no issue that would overturn Biden's narrow victory in Arizona. Last month, Maricopa County released the results of 2 new audits of its equipment that showed no malicious software or incorrect counting equipment, and that none of the computers or equipment were connected to the internet. Trump supporters who believe he was the election's rightful winner are pinning their hopes on the audit to finally produce any evidence of fraud that there was no evidence of, and this was the most safe and secure election in history, honk. So that's what's happening in Arizona. I'm interested to see where this goes and what happens and where this lands. But that'd be an interesting point to point out, is the fact that Mark Kelly, if Maricopa County does flip for whatever reason off this, yes, of course, we're going to see President Pelosi, which is a scary thought in and of itself, but President Pelosi without a Senate in front of her. Because McConnell's now the majority leader again. Grab your popcorn, kids, because this is going to get interesting. I'm almost more concerned and more entertained by the Mark Kelly side of this than the President Biden side of this. I'm more interested to see where that goes, to be completely honest. But grab a drink, grab some popcorn, and we will watch this. Let's see what's happening in the rest of the news. All right, starting with the Daily Wire. People are in pain over what we saw in that video. Harris demands action after Chauvin verdict. From Beth Bauman. Vice President Kamala Harris on Sunday advocated for the Senate to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, something she believes is the second half of the puzzle to addressing police reform in the U.S. The first half, in Harris's eyes, was former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin being convicted of George Floyd's murder. 9 minutes and 29 seconds, right? We all watched that video, she explained. Many of us watched it multiple times. People are in pain over what we saw in that video. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which is currently making its way through Congress, was brought about when Harris and her then colleagues, Senators Cory Booker and Representative Karen Bass, came together to address the issues they saw with policing in America, according to Harris. Her hope is that the Senate will have the courage to pass the legislation. There's no question we got to put an end to these moments where the public questions whether there's going to be accountability, questions whether there's going to be any kind of fairness that we should all expect or deserve in all of our lives, and in particular as it relates to people of color. The particular emphasis on black and brown men and the criminal justice system as it relates to policing, the vice president explained. Let's listen. Let's listen to her.
9 minutes and 29 seconds, right? We all watched that video. Many of us watched it multiple times. And people are in pain over what we all saw in that video. And in fact, it was in large part because of that case that, together with my then colleagues, Cory Booker in particular, and then on the House side, Karen Bass, that we wrote the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And I really do hope that the United States Senate, the House has passed it, that the United States Senate will take it on and have the...
Oh no, buffering. Oh no.
Courage to take it on, because there is no question that we've got to put an end to these moments where the public questions whether there's going to be accountability, questions whether there's going to be the kind of fairness that we should all expect and deserve in all of our lives, and in particular as it relates to people of color, with a particular emphasis on black and brown men in the criminal justice system as it relates to policing. This verdict is but a piece of it, and it will not heal the pain that existed for generations, that has existed for generations among people who have experienced and firsthand witnessed what now a broader public is seeing because of smartphones and the ubiquity of our ability to videotape in real time what is happening in front of our faces.
All right, that's enough listening to her. The George Floyd Policing Act in America, the George Floyd Policing in America Act, has previously passed the House of Representatives. It is currently being discussed in the Senate, where Senator Tim Scott is working with Democrats on the bill's language. One area of focus is on ending qualified immunity, which protects law enforcement officers from being sued for misconduct. According to NPR, Bass and Scott are also discussing how to address no-knock warrants, whether or not to ban chokeholds, and establishing a database of the officer's misconduct. Harris has previously branded herself as a progressive prosecutor, someone who's tough on crime but also in favor of revamping the criminal justice system. It's a label even the New York Times, a former newspaper, called into question based on her questionable past as San Francisco DA. I thought she was LA County DA. And her attempts to play both sides, those who are in favor of law enforcement and those who see major flaws, which is absolutely true. Interesting that Tim Scott is on the committee that's working on this, though. That comes, and actually brings me a little bit of faith to this. We do need to look at some of this stuff. Absolutely do. But once again, we're going to sit here and we're going to focus on the justice in policing and not the fact that there are way too many goddamn laws that these police have to enforce. And of course we're going to focus on the policing because that means that people like Her Majesty Vice President Kamala Harris put into play. The focus comes off the lawmakers and goes back onto the enforcers. And I don't buy, and I've been very open about this, I don't buy for a fucking second this whole thing of, well, we want to hold police accountable because all police are bad, all cops are bastards. Fuck 12, all cops are bastards, all this other kind of stuff off of this. When they trip over themselves to go honor the memory of Brian Sicknick and still try to this day, after the ME came out and told you that this guy did not die on the day of the Capitol Selfie Fest, they're still tripping all over themselves to try and come out and say, oh, well, we like the police we control. Look at the U.S. Postal Service Inspector General that's currently looking through your social media right now to see if you are a bad boy or if you're being a good little boy for the government. Look at that for a half a second and tell me what they think about police. It's not that they don't like the police. They like the police they control, and they're not big fans of the locals. So, this is all a bunch of bullshit. Let's keep going. This one came from local radio host Vicki McKenna, brought back out to our attention here. So, according to this, the Madison Metropolitan School District says, hello, West families, looking back on all the police brutality and violence that's going on in our country, in our communities, even after the verdict of Derek Chauvin and the murder of another young black female. It's very necessary to have space for families to discuss and process. The most important thing we can do for our students and their families is to continue our work to build strong, trusting relationships as we engage them through virtual and face-to-face learning. Only after we establish those strong connections can we expect students and families to openly share dialogue around such complex issues. Blah, 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 blah. Fucking propaganda. It's coming out of Madison. What do you expect? The important part for this is the fact that they are setting up separates. Here is your Zoom link for parents of color, updated Zoom link, and Zoom link for white parents. So they're segregating the parents because I bet you they're giving a completely different message to each of these. Now, one of the things that I want to point out, and this is demographic of Madison, is that there are going to be a lot more white parents in there than parents of color. Madison is probably one of the most red-line cities in America. Interesting, it's a Democrat-run city, but that is one of the most red-line cities in America. Of course, redlining is illegal, but it is massively expensive with almost no subsidies to go and live in Madison. The NIMBYists in Madison would prefer that all of the people of color go live over in Milwaukee. So it's interesting to me that this is out here like this, and I'm not saying that it's not. And I have a former coworker that I used to work with him, where he himself is whiter than snow, and so is his wife. By the way, he himself is whiter than snow, absolutely whiter than I am. And he and his wife, bless their hearts, adopted 2 children as infants. By the way, both of them, both of their boys they adopted them as infants, and both of their kids are black. So which link would my former coworker go to? That's an interesting question as well. But that's where we're gonna have to go. And the Jim Crow, here we go. Joe Biden looks at the voting laws in Georgia and says, "Man, this makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle." Jim Eagle, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's keep going. I got another tweet for you, as long as we're going down this way. Speaking on the same thing, Lori, over on Twitter, says, "Innocent until proven guilty is now. I don't want to be harassed because of the verdict." So she is screenshotting a tweet from Daniel Horowitz that says, "One juror, I don't want to go through rioting and destruction again. I was concerned about people coming to my house if they were not happy with the verdict." And that is a quote tweet of Lou Ragusi. Says, "Here's the full Q&A with Juror 96, as well as contemporaneous notes she took while impaneled as a juror in the Derek Chauvin trial." Carol Levin article, news. I grabbed that article because I think it's important that we have a look at this. So what the tweet was a little bit, just a touch hyperbolic, but not much. Not as much as you would expect. "I wish it didn't have to happen," alternate juror reflects on Derek Chauvin trial. This is from Lou Ragusi. A woman who sat as an alternate on the jury that found Derek Chauvin guilty of George Floyd's murder is speaking out about what it was like to parse through nearly 3 weeks of testimony in the former Minneapolis officer's high-profile trial. Brooklyn Center resident Lisa Christensen, which I'm interested in the fact that she is from and lives in Brooklyn Center, told Carol Levin's Lou Ragusi about her role on the jury as another police killing unfolded in her neighborhood. Christensen, who lives in the city where a white officer was shot and killed a 20-year-old black man during a traffic stop this month, said that if she had been part of the deliberations, she would have found Chauvin guilty. But Christensen had no idea she was one of the 2 alternates until the judge dismissed her right before the 12 juries were sequestered. Here are some of the notes here. Jenna Scurry, 911 dispatcher, pretty impressed that she had the gut feeling something was wrong and brave enough to report it to the supervisor's surgeon. If it turned out to be nothing, stating, "If she was wrong, she was wrong," concern. Use of force, camera freezing. Don Williams, he did a good job explaining the blood choke hold. "I thought he understood George Floyd was in distress he tried to bring to the officers." Let's see some other notes here. Yeah, most of these notes are based on the first day. And then there's the full interview off of this. A couple of things that went along with this as well. Ragus asked, when you made it to the jury, how much did you know about the case and what were your thoughts of being part of it? Christensen said, "I saw the video, but not in its entirety. I saw it 2 or 3 times on the news. I do not use social media, so I do not post anything or see anything there." Here's another one. "You're the perfect juror in that aspect. You came in about as clean slate as someone can have, considering how big of a case this was." And Christensen said, "Yeah, I did tell them I saw the settlement run across the bottom of the screen one day." Ragus asked, "What did that settlement mean to you?" Christensen said, "I knew it was a separate case. I knew civil cases are different with different rules, so it did not affect me. I was not surprised there was a settlement, but I was surprised they announced it beforehand." Yeah, just another one of those things that's going to sit back and taint the jury off of this. So, and I have read through a lot of this, and I think that what was said was hyperbolic, but I do know the fact that, I mean, we're sitting here looking at the fact that this woman is, I mean, she lives in Brooklyn Center, so guess what? She had to drive through all these protests to get there. The sequestration didn't happen until after all the testimony was in. These people were going home at the end of the night every day. And you don't think that any of this happened? I mean, she's telling you right there. She was at home. She was at home when Dante Wright was shot by Kim Potter, and she turned herself in. So, I see a mistrial off of this, I really do. And yes, I do think that's a mistrial based on the fact that these jurors should have been sequestered almost immediately. And it's very interesting that this happened under the coronavirus, where you can't exactly sequester jurors throughout the entire trial because you can't put them into the same room together for 3 weeks because they might bring coronavirus into the court, in spite of the fact they can all sit together in the court. So, yeah, I would be in fear, looking around me, having to go through a war zone to get to the trial. This was the perfect storm. It absolutely was. All right, let's keep going. I got another riot that's happening here. This one comes to us via Fox News. BLM protesters storm Oklahoma Capitol over GOP bills protecting drivers fleeing from riots, police from doxing. From Danielle Wallace. Demonstrators chanting Black Lives Matter stormed the Oklahoma Capitol on Wednesday, forcing the state House of Representatives into lockdown in order to protest several Republican-backed bills, including one that provides legal protections to motorists fleeing riots. More than 24 protesters filled the gallery on the 5th floor, while the Oklahoma House in the in the chamber below was in session. Video showed demonstrators chanting, "Stand united against all hate," and "We will use our voices to stand against corruption, to fight hate, to defend black and brown lives." The disturbance interrupted the session for several minutes. Okay. Now, I don't agree that this was an insurrection either. But if we go by the rules that were laid out by the government on January 6th, this was an insurrection. And I want to see the FBI start to use the full force of everything that they have at their disposal to do facial recognition and among anything else that they can to try and bring these people to justice, because by their rules, not by my rules, by their rules, this is an insurrection. This is an attempt to overthrow government by their rules. Not my rules, by their rules. So come on, FBI, let's go fucking chop chop. The demonstration was organized against what activists describe as anti-protest and anti-transgender bills, advancing through the GOP-controlled Senate and House. One bill increases penalties for protesters blocking traffic and protects drivers who unintentionally strike drivers with their cars. Another aims to protect law enforcement and their families from doxing. Well, yeah, that would be a good idea. Warning, graphic language. This was inside a few moments ago.
Disgrace! You embarrassed the whole fucking nation! Amen! The whole nation! Y'all kill black people!
You all are racist, traitors, and insurrectionist conditions! Where do you think I go? My point was made. I'll see y'all soon.
You are traitors, insurrectionists, seditionists, another woman shouted as protesters trickled out of the gallery. Oklahoma Highway Patrol escorted protesters from the building, and a drug dog was brought into the chamber to make sure nothing was left behind. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. KOCO reporter Dylan Richards tweeted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question was whether or not you have had conversations with the state board of pharmacy and the medical license.
House Bill 1674, co-authored by Republican State Representative Kevin West and his GOP colleague, State Representative Rob Standridge, creates a misdemeanor for unlawfully obstructing traffic while participating in a riot. It also adds criminal and civil liability protections for motor vehicle operators who unintentionally cause injury or death to an individual participating in a riot under certain circumstances, the Oklahoma legislature said. Well, good. And here's the problem with that. Now, first and foremost, if there is a riot going on, you should not be driving into the riot. You should not be driving into the riot. If you know what's going on, avoid it. Let these people tire themselves out and go around it. That is first and foremost. But if for whatever reason you find yourself into a place where you just happen to be motoring along one day, driving in my car, beep beep, and you happen across one of these little riots. You happen across one of these little things. You should have civil and legal liability protection if you plow into them. Because if you stop, there's no way for you to back up. They've surrounded your vehicle, and you are in danger at that point. So you should either be able to pull your piece out of the glove compartment and start defending yourself the old-fashioned way, or use that car, because they're going to yank you out of there. If they're surrounding your vehicle like that, they're getting ready to cause damage to your personal property or you. And you're in a situation where it's kill or be killed at that point. So no, there should be liability protection for that, because you're in the situation where you might die. This is an important protection for citizens who are just trying to get out of a bad situation, West said, according to the Oklahoman. When fleeing from an unlawful riot, they should not face threat of prosecution for trying to protect themselves, their families, or their property. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're fleeing, then you should not face. Now, if you're taking your car into the protest because it's hunting season, which I've actually heard people say before, then yeah, that's wrong, and you shouldn't be doing that. But if you're trying to get out of there, you're trying to protect yourself and your family at that point. So, absolutely. All right, let's keep going. I got one from The Hill, which is interesting because this seems to be the Harry Reid thing once again. Let's see where this goes. Democrats warn Waters censure moves opens floodgates, from Christina Marcos. House Democrats are warning that Republicans are opening a Pandora's box after forcing a vote on censuring Representative Maxine Waters this week. Multiple Democrats have introduced resolutions in recent months to censure or even expel Republicans, primarily over inflammatory rhetoric, making false claims about election fraud, ahead of the January 6th insurrection. Selfie fest. After Republicans forced the party line vote on Waters this week, Representative Jimmy Gomez circulated a letter renewing his effort to expel Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from Congress and urging more fellow Democrats to sign on to his resolution. You don't learn, do you? And moments before this week's vote, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer warned that Republicans forcing a roll call on censuring Waters makes it harder to justify not taking similar actions against Republicans in the future. As my friend, the leader, knows, we haven't had all the resolutions that have been introduced on my side of the aisle, Hoyer said, as the House Minority Leader prepared to trigger the vote to censure Waters. This makes it harder, however, not to proceed on numerous resolutions on my side of the aisle, he added. The threat underscores how many lawmakers have fewer qualms about imposing punishments as severe as censure or expulsion against each other as they continue to harbor fury over the insurrection more than 3 months ago. It was not a fucking insurrection, you fucking morons! Jesus Christ! They keep coming out and trying to say this. But if what we just saw in Oklahoma was not an insurrection, then that was not an insurrection either. They got let in. You know how I know it's not an insurrection? They didn't do anything. And one person died. and it was a protester. That is not an insurrection. That is a bunch of people making it known that they don't fucking like you. And they don't accept what it is that you're bringing forward. That is not an insurrection. There was no armaments. There was no real danger to anybody in the chamber. Somebody might have got beat, but that might be it. You know, skin on skin, you usually walk away from that. That was not an insurrection. You're surrounded by Capitol Police with guns who can shoot Ashley Babbitt unarmed for just popping her fucking head up. That was not an insurrection. When there's an insurrection, you'll know it. But yeah, they're going to go back and forth off of this one here. And they're going to reopen this Marjorie Taylor Greene thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a plant. She is not a serious representative. She is in there to come out and sow discord on the Republican side and make everyone look and say, look and see how mean and evil these Republicans are. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not what you guys think that she is. But furthermore, yeah, they're going to go back and forth and they're going to just censure each other left and fucking right. Well, good. With the Democrats in the slim majority, yes, absolutely. Go and censure everybody to death. Show how authoritarian you actually are. Show your hands at this point. Maxine Waters actually incited an insurrection. If we don't get what we want from the government, then we will take the government for ourselves. Be more violent. Be more aggressive. That is incitement of, at minimum, a riot. And furthermore, she did that as a sitting congresswoman. And as much as I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a plant, I will point out the obvious with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that is the fact that what she did, what Marjorie Taylor Greene did, she did as a private citizen. And she stopped once she took the oath of office. This is your government, folks. This is what your taxpayer money is paying for. All right, let's talk Biden. Starting with this, Biden is going to be giving a speech in a couple days. From CNN, Biden's Wednesday speech will outline his rhetorical endgame. From John Harwood. President Biden's primetime address to Congress this week represents another step in negotiations over his economic plan, but the rhetorical endgame has already come into focus. His appeal vaults past details of the sprawling $4 trillion infrastructure and jobs package to the continued viability of the American system itself. Lately, Biden has previewed his Wednesday speech from the well of the House by framing the stakes in simple but soaring terms. It's a basic question, the new president said last month in rolling out the first part of the package outlining his infrastructure goals. Can democracies still deliver for the people? When the fall of the Berlin Wall punctuated America's Cold War victory over communism 3 decades ago, that question would have made no sense. The superiority of democratic capitalism appears self-evident. But the simultaneous rise of China and deliberating evolution of partisan conflict within the U.S. have suddenly lent relevance to the question, even handed Biden a political tool. He is a political tool. In theory, a call to prove America can respond to economic competition, climate change, and inequality of opportunity. No. Could appeal to Republicans as well as Democrats in Congress. Polls show individual elements of the plan, as with his earlier COVID relief plan, enjoy substantial support from rank-and-file Republicans as well as Democrats. No, they don't. Yes, elements, like what was actually supposed to be in the bill, like actual COVID relief, not shoving a bunch of fucking pet projects in there to go along with it. So Biden's going to give a speech to a joint session of Congress. I'm going to start taking bets as to how long you guys think it's going to be, because, well, honestly, I want to see if this guy can talk for more than an hour at a time without saying something fucking stupid or his medicine wearing off. So, yeah, we'll watch that one. All right, another one from the Daily Wire here. Ocasio-Cortez praises Biden. Definitely exceeded expectations of far left. Been very impressive. From Ryan Saavedra. The Honorable and Venerable Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, D-Twitch, praised Democrat President Joe Biden during a virtual town hall late this week, saying that his leftist agenda has definitely exceeded the expectations that the far left had, and she thinks he has been very impressive. Let's listen.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say is that I do think that the Biden administration and President Biden has definitely exceeded expectations that progressives had. I'll be frank, I think a lot of us expected a much more conservative administration. And I think that his, not only what has ultimately come out, but the active invitation and willingness and collaboration with progressives in his first 100 days, or almost 100 days, has been very impressive. Yeah, I mean,
Of course she thinks it's impressive because she's probably one of them that's sitting there pulling the strings off of this. And she goes whichever way the wind goes. Now, most of your big-time progressives look at this like the people who went out and wheelbarrowed in a bunch of cow shit and put it back up in front of the White House to call Biden's climate plan bullshit. Would not agree with her, but she, I mean, just like what Biden does when he makes his political decisions. This is how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez makes her political decisions. Are you ready? Okay, the wind is coming from slightly from the center. Okay, so we're going to go on a slightly centrist way. All right, let's keep going. Kamala Harris decided to make a rambling speech that no one can make any sense out of here. Teresa, Joe, you know Trump won, tweets out, women people, what the fuck?
I think it is important to look at folks like Haley and Kelly and also say we're going to take note of the fact that during the pandemic, over 2 million people, 2 million women people became unemployed.
Is this woman fucking drunk? Women people. My God. Thank you for the host, by the way, Stephen Ignoramus. I just caught that out of the corner of my eye. Who gave this woman power? Seriously. Women people. All right, let's keep going. Some more Biden stuff. Start your day with AP Morning Wire. No! Go forth and spend. Call for action closes U.S. Climate Summit. Oh, this is going to be good. From Ellen Nickmeyer, Christina Larson, and Seth Borenstein. World leaders shared tales of climate-friendly breakthroughs and feverish quest for more to close President Biden's virtual global climate summit on Friday, from Kenyans abandoning kerosene lanterns for solar to Israeli startups straining for more efficient storage batteries. Okay. It was an exhortational end to an unusual pandemic-era summit, hosted from a specifically created TV-style set in the White House East Room. Biden's two-day gathering briefly united the heads of global rivals, America, China, and Russia, on screens anyway, long enough to pledge corporations on climate. Wouldn't it have been hilarious, and I didn't watch the summit because, well, didn't care, but wouldn't it have been hilarious if Putin got up on the stage in the middle of this and said, I have you on the stage now, asshole. Now we have debate. We do it live, okay? Long enough to pledge cooperation on climate, it also saw the U.S. and half a dozen allies commit to significant new efforts and financing to reduce climate-damaging emissions. Isn't it always funny? Just give us a little bit more money, and we will solve the climate crisis forever. Just a little bit more money. It always comes down to money with these people. Friday's closing message: go forth and spend, making good on pledges for rapid transitions to cleaner vehicles, power grids, and buildings to stave off the worst of global warming. This is 9/11 all over again, you guys. Go out and buy yourself a new car that you can't afford and a bunch of jewelry and maybe that new house right now, because otherwise the terrorists win. Except now it's go out and buy that new car that you can't afford and the jewelry you can't have and the house that you can't afford, because otherwise the climate change wins. The commitments we've made must become real, declared Biden, who is seeking $2.3 trillion from Congress for legislation that would partly go for electric charging stations and for laying out efficient new national electric grid and for capping abandoned oil and gas rigs at coal mines. Okay, that's the first $500 million of it. Where are you going with the rest of the $2.8 trillion? Commitment without doing anything is a lot of hot air, no pun intended. Ow, my brain. We're going to do this together, Biden said, speaking live to a final Zoom-style screen of leaders of national governments, unions, and business executives around the world. His closing message echoed the sentiments of Kenyan President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, who told the summit, "We cannot win this fight against climate change unless we go globally to fight it together." Compared to the United States and other wealthy but are carbon-addicted nations, Kenya stands out as a poorer country closing the technology gap despite limited financial resources. It has become a leading user and producer of geothermal and wind power. Small solar panels that charge lights and mobile phones have become cheap enough for some poor households to replace their kerosene lanterns. Opposition has stalled work on what would be the first dirtier burning coal-fired power plant. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, meanwhile, described scientists at hundreds of Israeli startups working to improve crucial battery storage for solar, wind, and other renewable energy. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen of Denmark renewed her country's pledge to end oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. Switching from offshore oil and gas rigs to wind farms. Good luck. Because that's 3/4 of that economy. And Norway's even bigger than that, by the way. That's the only reason Norway is one of the richest countries in the world right now, is because they found a massive oil field under Norway. And Denmark, I think, gets some of that too. So, good luck. Enjoy. Absolutely. Enjoy your independence from fossil fuels and your independence from having a functioning Western economy at this point. Biden convened the summit showcasing the United States' own high-profile return to international climate efforts after President Trump's withdrawal. Biden used the summit to announce he intended to cut U.S. coal and petroleum emissions in half by 2030, nearly doubling the previous target, except he's going from 2005 standards. And I know a lot of you guys don't do auto mechanics, so you don't know some of the stuff that's going on with this, but having been around, especially transport mechanics, for pretty much my entire adult life, a cut from 05 emissions is from half is like nothing. And I explained this on Friday, but I want to take just a second to explain this once again for you guys. So on Friday, I explained that there were 3 major levels for transport vehicles of emission standards that had to be met by the federal government. There was 04 emissions, 07 emissions, and 2010 emissions. And all of them were aimed by cutting more than 50%, by the way. Much, much more than 50% of diesel emissions. So by 04, if you had a diesel-powered vehicle, it had to have an exhaust gas recirculation valve, an EGR valve, meant to cut down some of the emissions by pushing some of the exhaust gas back through in a partial burn situation and let the carbon that was in it get burned out a second time, so it became more complete. So you got less carbon monoxide and less actual hydrocarbons coming through still. Like, that's where your black smoke is. And more of that's going back and getting burned for the second time to make sure you're getting less hydrocarbons, less carbon monoxide, and more CO2, H2O, and oxygen coming back out of the tailpipe. In 2007, they introduced that all vehicles on the road had to have a DPF system, and it was by law. They all had to have a DPF system. A filter that catches some of these soot particles and the unburned fuel that comes through. That's what that black smoke is. It's unburned fuel. It catches the majority of that in a filter, and then every once in a while, they burn the filter off, making a more complete burn of your hydrocarbons and the carbon monoxide that gets trapped in that filter. You get a more complete burn of them, and they get to be more water, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. And then lastly, in 2010, they initiated a requirement that if you're driving down the road in a commercial vehicle or any diesel-powered vehicle, because the non-commercial ones have it too now, and as of 2010, you had to have a catalyst in there to make a chemical reaction to make sure that everything burned cleanly and much more hot. So it gets a more complete burn off of the stuff. So you're getting back down to the regular elements of this once again. But they're coming out. Now they're talking about electric vehicles. They're talking about renewables, solar panels, heavy metals, things that come back out of this, and some of the chemicals that are in solar panels that, we haven't perfected solar panels yet. And I'm not against solar energy or wind energy. I like both of those ideas. But we don't have the technology to make the most use out of them yet. And furthermore, if a solar panel cracks, the ground below it becomes fallow forever. You're never going to be able to grow anything off that area again. But they're going to continue to do this, and yeah, this whole thing of cut in half by 2030, I would not be at all surprised if we're already there. From 2005 emissions levels to 2030, we're probably already there as far as emissions levels. We're probably even further than that, just given what the transport industry has been forced to do. So, anyway, going on with the AP and what's happening with that, I did want to point out the fact of how everyone was dressed for this particular summit. Jack Murphy Live tweets out, oh, this isn't the one I want. Where's the picture I want? Did I put it in? Son of a bitch, I didn't put it in. Let me see if I can grab that quick, because that should still be in the Discord. I thought I grabbed that one. I'm sorry, you guys. On-air production. Where is it? It's this one. Young Americans for Liberty status. I thought I put this in the stack for the day. Give that a second, I think. All the worlds get together for a Zoom call. Guess which one is the only one that's wearing a mask? It's this one. Does it make you wonder who's under that mask? All right, let's keep going. But now you tease what the next thing we're going to talk about is. So this tweet came out, and I don't know that this is real. I'm going to come right out and say I don't know necessarily that this is a real image or this is a real thing that's happened. I've not been able to find a follow-up or a confirmation to this. But Jack Murphy tweets out, this can't be real. Is it real? Biden's climate requirements. Cut 90% of red meat from your diet. Max 4 pounds per year. 1 burger per month. I don't know. I don't know if that's real. But the op-eds are already out off of this. All right. From Fox Business.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow.
An autoplay
Great pleasure
from
to
Fox
be with
Business.
you. Stocks today closed higher across the board. Mr. Market has apparently decided President...
There it is. Kudlow, Biden's Green New Deal means no meat for the 4th of July. Have grilled Brussels sprouts instead. From Fox Business staff. Kudlow's host, Larry Kudlow, painted a picture Friday of what America could look like under Joe Biden's new climate plan, saying grilled Brussels sprouts would replace hamburgers at the 4th of July. Larry Kudlow says, I'm still suffering from the economic shock from yesterday's Earth Day. It was bad because President Biden announced a 50% cut in carbon emissions in only a few years, which is going to throw a wet blanket over this booming economy for sure. Of course, it will wreck the fossil fuel sector, which still accounts for about 70% of our power. Speaking of stupid, there's a study coming out at the University of Michigan which says that to meet the Biden Green New Deal targets, America has to, get this, America has to stop eating meat, stop eating poultry and fish, seafood, eggs, dairy, and animal-based fats. Okay, got that? No burger on July 4th, no steaks on the barbecue. I'm sure Middle America is just going to love that. Can you grill those Brussels sprouts? So get ready. You can throw back a plant-based beer with your grilled Brussels sprouts and wave your American flag. Call it July 4th green. Now, I'm making fun of this because I intend to make fun of it. This kind of thing is stupid. It comes from a bunch of ideological zealots who don't care one whit about America's well-being, not one whit. So, and I mean, yeah, to get to some of these kinds of emissions. Now, once again, I don't know if Kudlow is looking at this from current emissions to 2030 emissions, or if he's going back to the 2005 to 2030 emissions, which we've got to be close if we're not there already on that one, but... You know, that's one of those things as well. Don't make me do stuff, man. Okay. And the other side of that is I do hope you guys like your Brussels sprouts. I am from Wisconsin, from America's Dairylands. I am literally surrounded by cows. I will go eat the meat, and I will enjoy the meat. All right. Speaking of plant-based beer, Charles U. Schumer is excited to be watching the Oscars with an ice-cold plant-based beer. Thanks, Joe Biden. Guys, am I drinking beer wrong? I mean, I've never had a microbrew here, but I've helped other people set theirs up. As far as I knew, all beer was plant-based. Am I wrong? Those of you who have set up a microbrew somewhere, am I wrong? Am I doing this wrong? It's barley and it's water. And yeast. Barley and yeast are plant-based. Anybody? Could somebody help me out on this, seriously? Because if I'm drinking beer wrong, I need to know about it. All right, I got one here from The Blaze for you guys. Nickelodeon teaches children about environmental racism, disables comments after getting smashed for indoctrinating our kids. From Paul Saka. Nickelodeon, the cable TV channel aimed at children, ran a segment lecturing kids about environmental racism, the topic that sounds more appropriate for adults than a network that is home to SpongeBob SquarePants. Seemed out of place for the cartoon-heavy channel for Minnie. Online commentators and parents condemned the segment as propaganda designed to indoctrinate our kids. For Earth Day, Nickelodeon aired a 1-hour special titled Nick News. Shit, that's still going. I mean, Nick News was full-on propaganda when it started. When I was 9. I remember the first episode of Nick News. And it's been full-on propaganda since then. They've never run a segment that wasn't propaganda. They call it news, and then they go back and tell you, the Democrats are going to save your entire life, and if you do everything that they can, and if you even dare to eat a hot dog on the 4th of July, then the entire world is going to burn out by, well, I suppose at that time it was the year 2000, but... Hosted by CBS News correspondent Jamie Yuccas, and has an appearance by President Joe Biden's special envoy on climate, John Kerry, who flies around on a private plane because he's too important for commercial, and when he does get on commercial, he takes off the mask. Nickelodeon's official Twitter account, which has nearly 4 million followers, posted a clip from the news special with the caption, "Learn the meaning of environmental racism." What do these cities have in common, Yuckus asked. They're all examples of environmental racism, a form of systemic racism, where minority and low-income communities are surrounded by health hazards because they live near sewage mines, landfills, and power stations and major roads. The clip, which features no shortage of appearances by teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg, was lambasted online. I remember when Nickelodeon didn't indoctrinate our kids. Well, they've been doing it for 28 years, so... The first episode of Nick News came out when I was 9. I'm going to be 37 this week. Let's talk about environmental racism affecting the South Bronx, shall we? Did you know that Democrats in New York City are the ones who closed Indian Point, which has supplied zero carbon, zero pollution energy to New York City for 60 years, to be replaced by fossil fuels? Democrats did this. I didn't know about that, actually. Nickelodeon is promoting environmental racism to your children. I'm old enough to remember when Nickelodeon taught children valuable life lessons through nuanced messages in shows like Hey Arnold and Avatar, The Last Airbender, instead of preachy propaganda. Honestly, what's the market for all this? It's a children's cartoon show. Nothing is sacred. These people are such a cancer. It has nothing to do with racism. Most unappealing infrastructure is surrounded by cheaper housing, which attracts lower income people. And in some cases, those people are minorities. But for your information, 14 million white Americans live in poverty versus 8 million blacks. Yeah, I used to live in one of those neighborhoods too, by the way. Surrounded by health hazards and roadways and the train. And all the health hazards that came from the Chicago Metro. I used to live in that neighborhood because I was poor and it had cheaper housing. Remember the good old days when the network just aired Salute Your Shorts, Hey Dude, Rugrats, and the Adventures of Pete and Pete? Rocko's Modern Life, and didn't peddle that left-wing dribble. Sad, truly sad. Well, once again, I do want to point out the fact that Nick News was always indoctrination. From its inception. Is DLive not connected? It does look like it's gone down. Because it's showing me, I don't know what's happening with DLive if I'm off of it. Somebody get over onto DLive if you could. And let Arvolt know that yes, we do appear to be off of DLive. I thought it was just maybe my connection. But yeah, I am off of DLive at this point. So that's going to be interesting. I have not seen an email yet to see if they have given me the boot, but yes, I am. I'll type that in there actually. That would be terrific if they just kicked me off of there at that point. Fuckers. All right. But that's what we see coming back from that. I got one from Axios for you guys. Caitlyn Jenner makes it official for California governor from Lachlan Markey, Elena Trine, and Jonathan Swan. Former Olympic decathlete and reality TV star Caitlyn Jenner on Friday officially announced her bid for governor of California. Jenner, a longtime Republican, is seeking to replace Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom in a recall election, hoping her celebrity status and name recognition can yield an upset in the nation's most populous state. But in deep blue California, she's decidedly not branding herself as a Trump Republican, even as she's counting on some of the former president's advisors to drive her strategy. She's assembled a team of prominent GOP ops, including Tony Fabrizio, the top pollster on Donald Trump's 2016 and 2020 campaigns, Ryan Irwin, the founder of Red Rock Strategies, and Tyler Deaton, president of Allegiance Strategies. She's also hired Stephen Chewing, a former Trump White House and campaign communications hand, who worked on Arnold Schwarzenegger's successful 2003 recall campaign. Give me just a sec. I'm going to see if I can fix this DLive thing. let's see if we toggle that off, because I pay for it, and I toggle it back on, if it'll fix it. But it is sending data out from Restream's side. Unable to connect. Alright, it looks like that... Okay, it's back on. Alright, it looks like I fixed it. That's the nice part about paying for a Restream, is I can actually do some of the stuff on the fly. So, Caitlyn Jenner is running for California governor against Gavin Newsom if the recall goes through. With the jungle primary system, I don't know if Jenner is going to get to the top with that R next to her name, but I know as somebody who's slapped Trump around before, she might actually be able to get onto this. Interested to see where this goes and interested to see what happens. But I mean, she's not going to be a populist Republican either. And furthermore, even as a Republican running California's executive branch, she's still going to be sitting and focused against a Democratic legislature. At best, you're going to sit down and you're going to find either Democrat supermajority that can override Jenner's vetoes, or just a lockdown of the government function from California for however long the term lasts. So, well, we'll see what happens with that. All right, let's see here. What else do we have? What else do we have? We got one from CNN. Caitlyn Jenner is getting advice from ex-Trump campaign manager Parscale on possible California governor bid, from Dana Bash and Carolyn Kelly. So anything to do to try and smear a Republican name, because of course, as soon as they find out that Brad Parscale's involved in this, now it's, well, this is going to be another Trump campaign out in California. You better not vote for this person because voting for Caitlyn is voting for Trump. Oh my God. Caitlyn Jenner is getting advice from former Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale on how to set up a potential California gubernatorial bid, according to a source familiar with the discussions. Parscale, who has known Jenner for a few years, agreed to help as a friend and not as a paid advisor. According to the source, he assisted her in finding people for key campaign roles if she goes forward with it. The New York Times, a former newspaper, first reported the news of Parscale advising Jenner, an American television personality and a retired Olympian. California Governor Gavin Newsom currently faces a burgeoning recall effort that began last year, fueled by anger over the restrictions he had put into place to curb the spread of the commie fucking coup in California. The recall campaign gained steam as a prominent state Republicans threw their weight behind both the organizing and fundraising efforts. Axios reported Tuesday that Jenner was speaking with political consultants in considering a run for the governor's seat, citing 3 sources with direct knowledge of the deliberations. Sources? But yeah, it looks like, and of course because Parscale's involved, and now we're going to have to come back and play the smear game once again off of this. Yeah, no, Ron, I fixed the DLive. It was offline from Restream, but I went back on and turned it off and turned it back on again. Now it's running again. And I'm going to look after the show and see if I got an email to see if they kicked me off for saying the wrong thing. Because remember, all of their terms of use are the same as YouTube's at this point. All right, an op-ed here from Stacey Abrams. Corporate America must pick a side on voting rights to prevent a Georgia repeat. Leaving us behind with boycotts won't save us. I asked you to bring your business to Georgia, and if you're already here, stay and fight, stay and vote. Boycotts work when the target risks losing something highly valued and the pain becomes unbearable. As a black person, a Southerner, and an American, I respect and defend the right to boycott. The advancement of civil rights has relied heavily on economic boycotts. Our new restrictive voting law has brought about calls to boycott Georgia corporations, and a national voting rights allies with economic influence are considering avoiding Georgia entirely. While employees and customers of Georgia corporations face new obstacles from the ballot box, the business community's response has been mixed, ranging from growing condemnation to tacit approval. Across the country, nearly 200 companies have voiced their opposition to similar bills. Unfortunately, others continue to maintain a damning silence, hoping the furor will fade with time. Boycotts aren't necessary yet. Sadly, Republicans in my home state have outperformed in the category of suppressive laws with the passage of Senate Bill 202 criminalizing handing out water. That's not what's fucking happening! Increasing unfounded challenges of voter eligibility that will no doubt lead to racial profiling and disenfranchisement. Seizing power from election officials, limiting access to drop boxes, restricting provisions for mail ballots, and more. So Abrams is coming out here and pointing out the fact that the All-Star Game and its draft came out of Georgia, and it crippled Atlanta. The PGA Tour came out and said that, oh yeah, you know what, we made the contract. We don't agree with the law, but we signed the contract and we decided to help this particular city, so we're going to stick around. But when the All-Star Game came out of Atlanta, that crippled a lot of business around Atlanta that was looking forward to that business bump to get themselves back up off the ground after the hell that they faced last year. But Abrams is right on this one. If all of the companies that she's pressured into coming out and condemning the Georgia voting law leave Georgia, then all that's going to be left is Marjorie Taylor Greene voters. That's a scary thought in and of itself. An entire state full of people who voted for Marjorie Taylor Greene. That scares the shit out of me. But, and this is one of the things too, it's, the people will come back and they can go boycott the company and put the pressure on them to go and do the right thing. But if they leave and they take all their business people with them, either they're putting the residents of Georgia out of jobs, with Georgia not having enough money to come back and take care of them, and probably pushing these people to move out of the country, out of the state rather, and take their votes with them, and they take their own votes with them out of state too. So Abrams has definitely figured out the algorithm to this, and she's going to try and make it happen for her. But there she screams. All right, I got one archived here from Newsweek. Remember our friend the Angry Pastor from Calgary, Alberta? He's back in the news. Angry Pastor again confronts Nazi police investigating church COVID violations in video. And I don't have the video because it's archived, but he is back. From Natalie Colarosi. An angry pastor posted a video Saturday calling local police the Gestapo and Nazis after they presented him with a court order related to investigations that his church is violating COVID-19 safety protocols. Artur Pawlowski, the lead pastor at the Street Church in Canada's Alberta province, tweeted a video Saturday claiming that the police SWAT team had disrupted his church service for the second time. So, because it's a YouTube video, I'm not going to sit back and watch it because we're on YouTube. And they did it again! Today, the Gestapo attacked our church again. History is being repeated in front of our eyes. Another sad day for freedom and democracy, Pawlowski wrote. Along with the tweet, Pawlowski shared video of the encounter in which he can be heard calling the Calgary police officers Nazis, fascists, and names of other paramilitary forces used in Nazi-era Germany. In the video, police officers present Pawlowski with a notice stating that his church may be under investigation for violating Kamikuf safety guidelines. A female officer can be heard stating police are not intending to disrupt the church service, but rather to stand in the back of the church to perform a safety inspection. In response, an infuriated Pawlowski can be heard screaming, "I do not cooperate with Gestapo!" Well, good. And that's totally fucking based, too. Absolutely. Did they have a warrant? And I don't know Canada's court system either. So I don't know what they need, if they need a warrant, if they don't, if the provincial government can just come in without a warrant because they don't have the Fourth Amendment up there. So, good on him. Absolutely. Stand up for your freedom. I want to point something out here. Just to bring something to the attention. So I've got a friend that lives in Toronto adjacent. I know she lives in Ontario. Actually, I don't know how close to Toronto she lives. But somewhere in Ontario she lives. And she and I have been friends for a little bit. And when I first met her, we were talking about the politics of things, and I told her I'm a Federalist. I'm fairly tradcon in my own lifestyle, and I'm fairly libertarian for as far as how I want my government to be. In my home, I'm tradcon. In my government, I'm fairly libertarian. But I also recognize the fact that what works for me doesn't work for the rest of the country. That's why I'm federalist. That's why I want people to move to places that have the amount of government that they want and need. And I don't want one overarching federal government over the top of us. Because there are people who are going to flock to California, who want the government to take care of them from the cradle to the grave. And there are going to people who are going to flock to Wyoming, who just want to live out in the open on a homestead and be left the fuck alone. There are absolutely going to be both. But even she, because she told me right off, and when I told her that, she's like, well, I'm an absolute lefty Lucy over here. Well, even little Miss Lefty Lucy is starting to realize what happens when the city premier and the provincial government both come down and crack down, where you can't even go out to your Walmart and buy a birthday card for your mom or supplies for your at-home small business. And yes, she has an at-home small business. That's your living. That's your bread and butter. If you can't go out there to get supplies so you can, send out product or send out flyers or send anything else like that, the provincial government's gone too far. And even she's started to see the value of a flag like this sitting behind me. Once you give the government power, they don't give it back. So even some of the left-wingers are starting to see this, realize what's gone too far, especially up in Canada, where they have no constitution, and start to say, hey, enough is enough over here. All right. I've got one here from Forbes. Let's talk a little bit of coronavirus stuff. Ron Johnson criticizes big push to get everyone vaccinated. From Andrew Solander of the Forbes staff. Ron Johnson on Thursday questioned the big push to ensure everyone is vaccinated against coronavirus, putting him at odds with many of his Senate Republican colleagues who have attempted to close the partisan gap in vaccination rates. In an interview with conservative Wisconsin radio host Vicki McKenna, who we heard from earlier in the program, by the way, herself a vocal coronavirus vaccine skeptic, Johnson launched into a condemnation of vaccine passports, a credential that would allow businesses to verify vaccination status. But Johnson also went a step further, declaring he sees no reason to be pushing vaccines on people, arguing that their distribution should be limited to those most vulnerable to the coronavirus, and asking, if you have a vaccine, quite honestly, why do you care if your neighbor has one or not? Johnson said he's getting highly suspicious of the big push to make sure everyone gets the vaccine, not only stating it's not a fully approved vaccine, but also arguing the fact that it is 95% effective means only a limited number of people need to be vaccinated. And honestly, I'm skeptical of it myself. I'm with Ron, and I've been drawing very, very distinct lines between myself and Ron Johnson lately, because he's turning into a swamp creature and a fucking idiot, and I'm not going to vote for him the third time. He promised 2 terms in solidarity with term limits advances, and his 2 terms are up next year. So I won't be voting for him a third time. I absolutely 100% will not. But with that being said, a good idea is rarely mandatory. And when they started talking about making this mandatory for people to live your everyday life, I realized something was up too. Now, if they'd have just left it out in the open and said, okay, we have it, if you want to get it, come and get it, I actually probably would have been amiable to the idea. I probably wouldn't have got it because I never got a flu shot either, but I'd be at least amiable to the idea. But once we start, talking about passports and mandates and governments coming down and saying you have to have this to go into this building, to come into the government buildings, for anything else like that, that's when I started to think that something was up. Something was going on. And good ideas are never mandatory, or rarely mandatory. Good ideas sell themselves on their own merits. It's the same thing with a filibuster. If you need to jam your agenda through, then it's not that good of an agenda. If you need to use the force of the government to jam your agenda through, it sucks. I'm just going to come out and say it. Your agenda fucking sucks. So, I'm with Johnson on this one. All right. Let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, the St. Charles County Public Health Board had to come out and urge you to get the vaccine as well, because the skeptics of gene therapy are out there, and we can't have those skeptics out there. So we'll watch the video, but let's read what the tweet has to say first. The Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna products authorized for use are mRNA vaccines that teach cells how to make proteins to trigger an immune response and build immunity. They do not interact with your DNA. Learn how mRNA vaccines work. And then a website to the cdc.gov. If you're teaching your cells how to make a protein, then you are interacting with the DNA. Because the DNA in your cells are what teach the cells what proteins to make. But let's at least listen to what they have to say. I thought I was going to be able to catch up with some live chat here. There's a lot of misinformation spreading about mRNA vaccines. Here are the facts. Although the Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech vaccines are the first mRNA vaccines to be authorized for use, the technology has been studied for years. mRNA vaccines teach our cells to make a protein that triggers an immune response in our bodies. That immune response protects us from getting infected with the disease. mRNA vaccines don't cause autoimmune disease or alter your DNA, and side effects are very rare. The Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech vaccines are safe and effective, and they're one of the best tools to fight this pandemic. And something else to point out, too, that I believe the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine, and hey, suddenly that one's getting pulled from the market. Weird how that one goes. Yeah, I'm still another one who wants to wait for a few years to see what this does. And I'm willing to at least consider it. If it's not mandatory. And there's a few years of study and a few years of observation that go along with it. But I've got this feeling that come 2025, when the last 10 people are still watching network cable television, you're going to start to see the local ads on the cable channels that say, did you take the coronavirus vaccine and get injured, or have a blood clot, or have a family member get a blood clot and die? You may be eligible for compensation. I'm looking forward to seeing those in 5 years. All right. Got just a few more here, then we'll do something that restores my faith in humanity, and head on out of here for the day. From Reuters, U.S. CDC says children can get within 3 feet at summer camp. From no author given. Children attending summer camp can get within 3 feet, 1 meter of each other, but should wear masks to limit the spread of COVID-19, according to fresh guidance issued by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC's updated recommendations for camps issued on Saturday have been eagerly awaited by parents as the end of the school year approaches. The agency said its camp guidance aligns with its evidence for social distancing at schools, with at least 3 feet between children and at least 6 feet when eating and drinking. Camp counselors and other adults should stay at least 6 feet from children and each other. What the fuck is wrong with this world? How did we get here? How did we give enough power to the government that the CDC can tell you how to run your fucking summer camp with a disease that almost statistically never affects children? It is almost a statistical impossibility for a child to even get sick, die, or spread the coronavirus. And this is what we're going to do for summer camps, guys. This shit's never going to stop. Especially summer camp, when you're out in the sun for the majority of it. You only go into your cabin to sleep. Ugh. What is wrong with this world? All right. Couple more. From the Blaze, Chipotle CFO admits $15 an hour minimum wage means higher menu prices, predicts all restaurants would pass cost on to customers. No shit, Sherlock. We've been telling you this for years. For years, I have told you. From the beginning of this program, I have told you. 300 episodes ago, we were talking about minimum wage back then, and I told you 300 episodes ago that the businesses, especially when they're big businesses like Chipotle, they don't pay the extra cost for the $15 an hour minimum wage. You pay the extra cost for the $15 an hour minimum wage. It's the same with raising the corporate taxes. It's the same with raising any business taxes at this point. They don't pay that. You pay that. The price of your consumer goods goes up, and inflation goes up. Chipotle Chief Financial Officer Jack Hartung admitted last week they would be forced to raise menu prices if the government mandates a $15 an hour minimum wage. In fact, Hartung said most restaurants would not absorb the cost of forced increases in wages but pass them on to customers. While speaking on a quarterly earnings call last Wednesday, Hartung said Chipotle executives would raise menu prices to offset the cost to the restaurants would incur if the federal government forced them to pay each of their nearly 90,000 employees at least $15 an hour. We're not that far off, like, for example, a $15 number, but let's say, for example, there's going to be an across-the-board 10% increase on our wages, Hartung said, Business Insider reported, and that would, to offset with the menu pricing, would take us 2 to 3% more in price increases. Hartung said the forced wage increases, amounting to an average of 15% overall, and increased menu prices would be very manageable. Yes, and I mean, for somebody like Chipotle, that's actually going to be... It'll be a manageable amount. You're not going to see like a $30 fucking burrito or anything like that from Chipotle. But, you know, that 2 to 3% adds up. And that's for a big business like Chipotle that is trading. Remember, because we see this, we read the stocks every morning. Chipotle is trading on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And the S&P too, I believe. I believe they're on the S&P as well. So they're a major traded IPO company. Well, not IPO anymore, but they're a major traded company. For them, it's going to be 3 to 5 or 2 to 3%. I think it's going to be closer to 3 to 5, but it's going to be like 3 to 5%, which means, you know, a couple more pennies on your taco bowl. But now, Jose and Lupe's local tacos in the middle of buttfuck Wyoming, they're going to see a significant increase. They're actually going to see, they're probably going to have to raise their prices to a point where it might not be affordable to go there. And oops, I guess we're going to have to go to Chipotle now at this point. That's going to put them out of business. It's not about what the big businesses are going to come out and tell you what they're going to do. Yes, we're going to raise our prices. We have to. I wonder if there is a Jose and Lupe's local tacos in Wyoming. I just made that up. Yeah, no. I've told you from the beginning, businesses don't pay tax increases and they don't pay wage increases. You do. So that's what's coming off of this. Let's see. I've got one here that I found this very interesting. And I don't understand what the point of this is, especially given the fact that I thought wolves were supposed to be endangered on top of this. This is Changing America from the Hill. Idaho Senate passes bill allowing 90% of the state's wolves to be killed. The Idaho Senate passed the measure in a 26-7 vote. Lawmakers in Idaho are moving forward with a bill that would allow the state to hire private contractors to kill up to 90% of the current wolf population as their growing numbers threaten livestock, according to the Associated Press. The Idaho Senate passed the measure Wednesday in a 26-7 vote, and the bill now goes to the state's House chamber. Wolves were reintroduced into Idaho in 1995 and removed from the state's list of endangered species in 2011. In February, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game said the wolf population has held steady at approximately 1,500 over the past 2 years, even though hundreds have been killed by hunters, trappers, and other wolf population measures conducted by authorities. Federal criteria for wolf recovery requires about 150 wolves in the state. These wolves, there's too many in the state of Idaho right now, Republican State Senator Mark Harris, a sponsor of the legislation, said during the debate on the Senate floor. We're supposed to have like 15 packs, 150 wolves. We're up to 1,553, that was the last count. 1,556, something like that. They're destroying ranchers. Well, they're destroying wildlife. This is a needed bill. So I guess if you ever wanted to go wolf hunting, now is the time. I don't know why you wouldn't. Well, there's got to be another way to come out and do this. And I do have to wonder how far this is spread as well. Is this going into Montana at this point? Are we seeing some of this going into eastern Washington? Anything else like that?